Our story begins with Eita, your typical ugly loser, who's anti-love and hates girls too, because he's determined to ignore women and focus only on his studies, so he can escape his cringe-filled past. But despite his hatred of women and love, you already know that our boy is soon gonna find himself with a harem of cute girls who apparently can't resist his irresistible Chad Riz. But for now, Eita is completely anti-romance and wants nothing at all to do with love and girls, so the closest thing he'll ever have to a girlfriend is his right hand, despite having Chiwa, his cute childhood friend and neighbor, who's always energetically trying to drag Eita out of his study cave to inject some fun into his textbook-driven life, which seems impossible, as even on their walks to school, Eita's too busy studying his Sigma male grindset to even notice Chiwa's non-stop yapping. But when he arrives in class shortly after, Eita and his best friend Kaoru are surprised to find that Masuzu, the most popular girl in school, is now seated right next to him. And although all the other boys are incredibly envious of being so close to the mysterious school beauty, Eita really couldn't care less, as he refuses to let normie things like plot get in the way of securing his medical school scholarship. But while all the boys are jealous, Masuzu is simply surprised to find that, unlike the other apes in class, Eita seemingly has no interest in bagging the school's most unattainable girl, and his stone-cold indifference makes Masuzu more intrigued. So without warning, Masuzu suddenly clings to Eita and confesses her love for him in front of the entire class, immediately infuriating all the other boys, who at this point just want to turn Eita's potato-looking head into mashed potatoes. However, Eita's not buying Masuzu's confession, and after class, he immediately confronts her about this, forcing her to eventually reveal her true motives. And as it turns out, Masuzu's had enough of the endless stream of love confessions she gets every day, and since Eita is just as anti-love as she is, she wants him to become her fake boyfriend to scare off the seemingly endless stream of losers simping for her. Naturally, Eita wants nothing to do with this lunatic and immediately refuses, but unfortunately for him, Masuzu whips out Eita's death note, his secret journal filled with cheesy, overly emotional poetry and teenage angst that he threw away hoping no one would ever see the cringe past of when he used to believe in love. And upon seeing this, Eita's pulse skyrockets, his palms are sweaty, there's vomit on his sweater, mom's spaghetti, and faced with the threat of getting memed into oblivion if his notebook ever got out, Eita has no choice but to cave to Masuzu's blackmail and become her fake boyfriend from now on, despite both of them wanting nothing to do with love. But as the sun sets on their walk back home, Chiwa rushes towards Eita and Masuzu, blocking their path as she expresses her anger about Eita keeping his relationship with Masuzu a secret from her, even though she's his closest childhood friend. Masuzu intervenes, however, and calmly introduces herself to Chiwa, before suddenly surprising everyone by grabbing Eita's arm and suggesting they go on a date, leaving Chiwa completely dumbfounded as she watches the couple walk away together. The following day during lunch, Eita and his friend sit together and discuss their surprise over Eita suddenly getting a cute girlfriend somehow despite his anti-love beliefs. In response, Eita laments that constantly being the subject of gossip by others is an uncomfortable position to be in. Suddenly, Kaoru changes the topic and asks if Chiwa has come to school that day, but Eita is uncertain as Chiwa has grown distant ever since he started dating Masuzu, which prompts Kaoru to encourage Eita to resolve the awkwardness with Chiwa since she's like family to him. On the way home with his new hot girlfriend, Eita tries to share something with Masuzu, but she immediately shuts him down as she claims to already know what he's about to say, and simply asks Eita to bring Chiwa to her the next day, which just confuses Eita, while Masuzu gleefully advises him to look forward to it. The next morning, Eita takes Chiwa to Masuzu, only to find her dressed in an elegant kimono for some unknown reason, which surprises Chiwa. But as the gang talks about the recent awkwardness between Chiwa and them, Masuzu realizes from Chiwa's answers that she's angry because she's struggling to attract male attention, probably because she severely lacks plot, which prompts Masuzu to offer to help, as she whips out Eita's death note and promises to make any man fall for Chiwa or else. And although Chiwa initially declines, she eventually agrees, and with that, Masuzu decides to create a club to teach young women proper etiquette and manners, redefining what it means to be a refined and elegant lady. But while Chiwa is excited to become a proper lady, Eita unfortunately does not share the same enthusiasm. The next day, club activities officially begin, and Chiwa and Masuzu immediately get to work by setting a goal to get Chiwa to seduce Sakagami, a popular third-year basketball player that Chiwa has been crushing on for a while. and to achieve this, they plan to have Chiwa befriend Sakagami's brother and pretend to be a guitar player. Their plan doesn't go as intended though, since they fail to take into account that Chiwa doesn't know anything about using a guitar, and she just ends up embarrassing herself and running away without even taking the guitar out of its case. And after witnessing this absolute faceplant by Chiwa, Masuzu anticipates that Chiwa will leave the club, but to her surprise Chiwa returns calmly, enjoying tea without a trace of sadness. So the gang quickly brush off the embarrassing moment and try to think of new ways to seduce Sakagami. That's when Masuzu suggests that the best way to attract a man is by showing off your plot, and playfully teases Eita by briefly revealing her own plot, all while Chiwa is completely unaware of what's going on. But when they get back on topic, Eita reveals that Chiwa is simply too stubborn to leave the club until she fulfills her goal, as he recalls how, in middle school, Chiwa was expected to be the star of the kendo team but suffered an accident that severely affected her hip. And after extensive rehabilitation, she recovered to a point where it no longer hindered her daily life, but she could no longer participate in sports. Since then, she has lost sight of any of her previous goals, but she's now found something new to pour her heart into, determined not to give up until she becomes Sakagami's mommy. And upon hearing Eita recount this story, Masuzu finally understands why Eita and Chiwa are so close. And as soon as Chiwa leaves the room, Masuzu immediately throws herself onto Eita and reminds him not to forget that he belongs to her. The next day in the club room, Masuzu advises Chiwa to confess to Sakagami, as she's confident that her previous display of guitar mastery has made Sakagami at least aware of Chiwa's existence. But despite Chiwa being hesitant at first, she eventually agrees. Eita, on the other hand, is concerned that Masuzu has just been talking nonsense this entire time and misleading Chiwa, but he still decides to support Chiwa's decision in the end, probably because he doesn't want his name written in the death note. After school, Chiwa leaves behind a love letter for Sakagami, inviting him to meet her on the rooftop to confess, while Masuzu and Eita secretly hide and wait. And to their surprise, Sakagami actually shows up to the rooftop, as he admits to Chiwa that he found her guitar antics intriguing and cool, which is exactly his type of girl. He then invites Chiwa to go see a movie with him on Sunday to get to know her better. Afterwards, on the walk back home, Masuzu just can't stop smiling, pleased that their plan has worked out so perfectly, as she declares this their club's first victory, which she teasingly claims it was all thanks to Eita's love journal. However, Chiwa suddenly expresses that she honestly believes the person who wrote Masuzu's love journal sounds wonderful, as she thinks it's amazing that he believes all those things without feeling embarrassed, not realizing that the true owner of the journal is Eita, who is actually incredibly embarrassed by it. Later that night at dinner time, Eita prepares a whole feast to celebrate Chiwa accomplishing her goal. But upon seeing how comfortable and pleased Eita is about her going on a date with another man, Chiwa suddenly starts to feel a bit down. And when Eita acts like a typical oblivious MC and questions why she's sad when she's worked so hard for this, Chiwa suddenly bursts into tears and shouts that she wishes she had never met him at all. And with tears flowing from her eyes, she rushes out of his house without giving Eita the chance to grasp what just happened, as his massive lack of brain cells leaves him completely oblivious to the fact that Chiwa is actually in love with him. In a flashback from when Chiwa returned from the hospital after her accident, she rushed to Eita's house to visit him and check on him, despite having not entirely recovered yet. But she was worried about Eita's well-being since his parents had recently divorced and abandoned him to pursue other relationships. And while eating dinner together later that same day, they discussed their new goals for when they entered high school. But while Chiwa still didn't know what she wanted to do now that she couldn't do kendo anymore, Eita revealed that he plans to study hard and earn good grades to get into a top medical school, so he can become a doctor and properly treat Chiwa's injury. And upon hearing this, Chiwa immediately bursts into tears, as she never imagined that Eita would ever do something like that for her. The following Sunday, Chiwa arrives earlier than Sakagami at the date's location, while Eita and Masuzu are merely supposed to watch from afar. But Masuzu uses a woman's forbidden technique, her plot, to try and turn this into a real date for them too. But when Sakagami finally shows up, for some reason, Eita feels that something is off about Chiwa's date with him. And not long after arriving, Sakagami admits that he was late because he's on a date with another woman, and reveals that he only invited Chiwa out on a date to prank her, as he would never actually be interested in a girl like her. Meanwhile, Eita watches horrified at what is happening to his precious friend, as Sakagami and his friends mock and humiliate Chiwa without the slightest sense of guilt.
Emotional damage!
And although Eita rushes in like a knight in shining armor, for some reason he immediately begins acting like he's some super powerful hero in a video game, and even tries to cast an ability without realizing that this isn't that kind of anime, and he's immediately beaten to a pulp.
Huh?
However, upon seeing Ida's undeniable bravery, Chiwa grabs a nearby stick and puts her kendo training to good use as she attacks Sakagami and his friends one after the other, striking them until they can't get back up. But in the end, Chiwa actually defeats them with confusion as she apologizes to Sakagami for misleading him and confesses that she never actually liked him and just agreed to go on a date to get back at Ida for being so oblivious, all while Ida lays defeated on the ground, with still no idea that Chiwa is in love with him. Meanwhile, Masuzu heads home without her fake boyfriend, while another girl secretly watches Chiwa care for a bruised and beaten Ida. The next day at school, Ida is shocked to find that Masuzu hasn't gone to school at all today, so after school he plans to visit his fake girlfriend at her home, but is instead unexpectedly approached by her on the street. And as the two walk back home together, Ida thanks Masuzu for secretly tossing Chiwa the stick the previous day so she could save him, and in response, Masuzu admits that she admires Ida for sincerely wanting to selflessly help others, and then immediately smooches him before he has a chance to respond. And just as Ida is confused with seeing this more gentle and loving side of Masuzu, she then orders him to drink sewage water as punishment for soiling her lips. The next day, however, Ida is minding his own business when Masuzu and Chiwa both suddenly show up at his house, ready to compete for his attention like it's some kind of Olympic sport. A few days later at school, Ida stumbles upon an anonymous love letter in his shoe locker where the author gushes about their admiration for Ida and expresses a desire to rekindle some mysterious past connection with him. But Ida has no idea what his admirer is yapping about. So, naturally, Ida turns to his pal Kaoru for help, who immediately jumps to the conclusion that Chiwa is behind the letter. And while having lunch with Chiwa later that day, Ida finds himself believing more and more in Kaoru's theory as Chiwa starts acting all lovey-dovey with Ida and demanding headpats. Suddenly, however, Masuzu swoops in and accuses Chiwa of trying to steal her precious boyfriend, before shoving Chiwa's face into her meal. Surprisingly, however, Chiwa forgives her for this, and the gang return to their usual club activities. And for today, Masuzu proposes that they create a theme song in order to attract new members, using Ida's love journal as inspiration for the lyrics, which absolutely horrifies Ida. At the end of school, when Ida checks his shoe locker again, he's shocked to find another love letter from his secret admirer, with this one being even more insistent on them having a deep undying connection. And afterwards on his walk home with Masuzu, while Ida tries his best to keep his lunatic admirer a secret, she deduces that Ida is hiding something from her and goes full detective mode. But unfortunately for Mrs. Holmes, she mistakenly deduces that Chiwa has started living rent-free in Ida's mind, and once again orders him to stop paying attention to other girls, even though they're a fake couple. And the next day at school, Ida is surprised to find Masuzu suddenly acting more cold and distant towards him, which only confuses him more. A few days later, Ida agrees to take care of Chiwa while her mom is off to work, since Chiwa has caught a fever. But when she wakes up in her room, she's surprised to find Ida sitting there by her side, and immediately uses this golden opportunity to try and seduce him, by asking him to help wipe her down, which Ida agrees to despite the awkwardness it causes. Suddenly, however, Ida's sharp eye spots a pair of his own chopsticks just chilling in Chiwa's room, and Chiwa, with zero shame, confesses that she stole them without asking, as these chopsticks remind her of precious memories and serve as a little time capsule of her bond with Ida.
What the heck?
Somehow this stalker behavior doesn't freak Ida out though, and he just continues taking care of Chiwa for the rest of the day. The next morning, Chiwa pops up at Ida's place bright and early, and casually drags him to school with her. But once they arrive there, Masuzu immediately picks a fight with Chiwa and Ida, for once again letting another girl get close to him. But in the middle of this whirlwind, Ida discovers yet another love letter stuffed in his shoe locker, and slams it shut before his harem can see. This time, however, the love letter demands a rooftop meeting. But when Ida arrives, he's surprised to find a black-haired girl named Hime waiting for him, who he doesn't recognize at all. But as Hime soon reveals, she's actually the complete noob he used to play online games with back in the day. And when Ida finally remembers who she is, and calls her by her username, Hime immediately rushes in and gives Ida a big all-hug like they're long-lost soulmates, just as the rest of his harem conveniently arrives at the perfect time. And to make matters worse, Hime drops a bombshell by declaring herself as Ida's former romantic partner. But Chiwa, not one to be outdone, introduces herself as Ida's loyal childhood friend, while Masuzu smugly claims her throne as his current girlfriend. But Hime is having none of it, as she makes it clear that the idea of Ida being with anyone else is absolutely unacceptable. The next day, however, Ida walks into the club room, only to surprisingly find Hime and Masuzu casually chatting like old pals. And even more surprisingly, Masuzu is even tossing around the idea of Hime joining the club, which Chiwa of course immediately objects to, pointing out that Hime doesn't care one bit about the club, as she's just here for Ida. However, Masuzu whips out Ida's love journal and recounts a tale of grandiose love which leaves both girls in awe, and convinces Chiwa to put aside her differences and let Hime join the club, while Ida is completely crushed by this overwhelmingly humiliating story. But before Hime can join, Masuzu and Chiwa decide to test Hime by having her write a poem, to see if she's fit to join a club for pure elegant maidens. But even though Hime agrees, she suddenly faints, leaving the whole situation in complete disarray. That weekend, the club is tasked with cleaning the school as punishment for teasing a student and inadvertently causing them to faint. But just when things couldn't get any worse, a sleek black car pulls up, and out steps Mana, Masuzu's younger sister. She apologizes to Masuzu for their disastrous conversation with their father, who's absolutely livid and demands that Masuzu come home right now to prevent any more trouble. And without missing a beat, Masuzu breaks up with Ida on the spot and heads back with Mana, leaving everyone in shock. As Masuzu goes to change, Chiwa bolts after her, determined to get some answers for this sudden breakup. Meanwhile, Hime suddenly rushes up to Ida, waving her completed poem like it's a trophy. Even though it's their day off and there's no deadline, she just couldn't help herself as she just wanted to spend the day doing fun stuff with everyone. But out of nowhere, Mana swoops and snatches Hime's work right out of her hands, as she's suddenly super interested in this weird little club Masuzu has seemingly created. And despite Ida's best efforts to grab the poem back, Mana's security squad steps in and effortlessly shoves him aside. And as Mana quickly scans Hime's heartfelt work, she bursts into laughter, mocking it for being childish, causing Hime's heart to practically shatter right there on the spot. But Ida, no longer able to stand this mean girl routine, finally snaps and yells at Mana to stop making fun of people's dreams and ambitions, pointing out that fantasies are what keep people going when reality gets too tough to handle, and that she has no right to make fun of anyone's dreams. Ida then demands that Mana apologize to Hime, just as Masuzu and Chiwa return. And in that moment, Hime, wiping away her tears, bravely speaks up, as she reveals that for the first time ever, she's found a place where she truly feels accepted, and she wants to join the club with Masuzu, and Chiwa by her side, words that even manage to move Masuzu. And with this, Masuzu gladly welcomes Hime into the club, while simultaneously refusing to go with Mana to see their father after all, which absolutely infuriates her little sister. And once the dust has settled, Masuzu thanks Ida for always being such a dependable person, while reminding him that he belongs only to her, and the gang celebrate the newest addition to their club. Sometime later, Ida jolts awake in the infirmary, groggy and confused, only to find Hime lying next to him with absolutely nothing on for some reason. And as if that's not enough chaos for one moment, Chiwa and Masuzu are outside, calling out his name, their voices getting closer by the second. Meanwhile, Hime calmly tells Ida to relax, which obviously doesn't work at all when you've got plot mountains staring you in the face. And when the infirmary door suddenly opens, Ida instinctively dives behind a curtain, certain that he's moments away from being murdered. Meanwhile, Masuzu and Chiwa are greeted by the sight of Hime, scrambling to cover herself with a blanket. But while Masuzu is unfazed by this heavenly sight, she's definitely suspicious and demands to know where Ida is. And despite Hime insisting with her terrible acting that she has no clue where Ida is, Masuzu remembers him saying he was heading to the infirmary because he was feeling sick, which Hime tries to brush off by saying they must have heard the wind, unaware that the girls can clearly see Ida's feet sticking out.
It was at this moment that he knew he f***ed up.
But before Masuzu can pull the curtain and reveal Ida, Fuyumi, a strict member of the disciplinary committee, arrives to put an end to their shenanigans and demands that Masuzu disband her club, all while Ida is still awkwardly hiding behind the curtain. But Masuzu flat out refuses, while Chiwa antagonizes Fuyumi by suggesting that she wants to disband the club simply because she's jealous of them, since she's incapable of finding a boyfriend. But in response, Fuyumi shouts that she actually does have a boyfriend, and stutters nervously as she claims that he's an older guy who goes to a different school. But Masuzu and Chiwa know she's lying, especially when it's obvious that she's struggling to come up with a name for her boyfriend, and the girls leave completely unimpressed. But despite this, the following day the disciplinary committee still temporarily shuts down their club. When summer vacation then arrives, Ida, like a typical nerd, signs up for cram school. But as fate would have it, he gets placed in the same class Fuyumi, the soon-to-be new addition to his growing harem. And naturally, being paired up with this idiot makes her rather happy, as she awkwardly tries to approach him while pretending like she's not interested in him, turning all her attempts at flirting into complete failures. After a long day of studying, Ida thinks he's finally free until Masuzu summons him to a cafe and, afraid she'll spill all his embarrassing secrets, Ida sprints over there faster than a cat chasing a laser pointer. And once they meet, Masuzu unveils her latest scheme as she's plotting to use Fuyumi as leverage to keep the club from being disbanded. And of course, Ida's roped into her plans whether he likes it or not. The next day at cram school, Fuyumi tries approaching Ida again with her signature awkwardness and joins him and Kaoru for lunch. But when Ida casually praises the food she made, her heart practically soars, and she finds herself suddenly unable to keep up her usual serious demeanor. And for the rest of the day, she walks around with a huge grin on her face that leaves passersby thinking she's a complete weirdo. The next day, Kaoru and Fuyumi invite Ida to join them for a fireworks display, but Ida declines, opting to spend his night at the cram school study hall instead. But when Fuyumi insists that he come with them, Ida casually mentions that she should watch the fireworks with her boyfriend instead, which catches Fuyumi completely off guard, forcing her to give up on trying to invite Ida. Later that day, while everyone is gathered for dinner, Masuzu unveils her master plan to have Ida date Fuyumi, make her fall head over heels for him, and then boom, they can manipulate her to reinstate the club, which Chiwa and Hime are surprisingly okay with. But when Ida refuses, she reads his journal out loud, bringing up long-forgotten memories of when Ida was even more of an absolute giga cringe lord, ultimately humiliating him until he accepts. And with Masuzu's master plan ready to commence, they set Ida and Fuyumi up on a double date with Chiwa and Kaoru, so that Chiwa can create an opportunity for Ida to be alone with Fuyumi, while Masuzu secretly stalks them from afar by wearing an earpiece. But as they walk together, Fuyumi suddenly strikes up a conversation with Ida, taking a nostalgic trip down memory lane about their kindergarten days, which leaves her blushing even though Ida has no idea what she's talking about. Chiwa, however, never one to let someone else steal the spotlight, immediately grows possessive and gets between them, even though it's literally her job to get Ida and Fuyumi alone together. And as the date drags on, Chiwa finds herself incapable of putting aside her feelings for Ida, and she constantly interferes at every opportunity, preventing Masuzu's brilliant scheme from coming to fruition, while Kaoru just sits back completely unbothered by this. And to top it all off, Masuzu also finds herself sidetracked by her feelings for Ida and completely forgets to snap incriminating photos of Fuyumi, despite being the mastermind behind all this. And at the end of the day, the plan is seemingly a failure, unaware that Fuyumi has actually already been crushing on Ida all along. A few days later in the classroom, Ida is minding his own business when he spots a mysterious notebook. But just as he's about to dive into its secrets, Fuyumi materializes out of nowhere and snatches it out of his hands, knocking over Ida's entire bag in the process. But neither of them realize that in a panic, Fuyumi had accidentally grabbed Ida's bag, leaving behind her own bag filled with her embarrassing cringe-worthy written works that she'd rather die than have Ida see. Realizing her colossal mistake, she races back to the classroom, only to find Ida already deep in her notebook, reading through her wild delusional poems. And, overwhelmed with embarrassment, Fuyumi immediately begins chasing Ida around the school, until they both eventually trip. But Fuyumi is so busy sobbing that she doesn't even realize that she's sitting right on top of Ida, as she's absolutely devastated that Ida's seen her notebook filled with all her wild fantasies. Feeling guilty, Ida tries to comfort her, and even shares a few of his own embarrassing fanfiction, which is actually cringy enough to make Fuyumi laugh and brighten her mood. And without missing a moment, she embraces Ida tightly as the two stand in silence. When Ida then returns Fuyumi's crumpled up notebook, he feels guilty and offers to buy her a new one, but Fuyumi refuses, and instead asks him to pay her back by spending time with her. The next day, Ida waits for her with a hat pulled low over his face, so Fuyumi won't be embarrassed to be seen with a nerd like him. And to Ida's surprise, Fuyumi leads him to a remote, quiet area that stirs a vague sense of familiarity in both of them. And as the night falls, the fireworks show begins. And just then, Ida remembers that up the hill is a massive cedar tree, the perfect spot to watch the fireworks display. Suddenly, memories from their time as kindergarten best friends floods Ida's mind, and he finally remembers Fuyumi. She then unexpectedly hands Ida a marriage registration form they filled out as children 10 years ago, which Ida had promised to stamp when they grew older, while confessing that she had lied about having a boyfriend. Ida, however, has no idea how to react to this incredibly sudden marriage proposal, and decides the best course of action is to simply run away. And thankfully for him, he accidentally bumps into Chiwa and Hime not long afterwards, and decides to head home with them without giving Fuyumi a proper answer, which absolutely infuriates her. But despite this, when the gang return to school after summer vacation, they find that their club has been reinstated, as Fuyumi informs them that their club may resume operations, realizing that hastily labeling the club as dangerous was a mistake. But she believes that all they need is a leader to guide their club in improving their understanding of love, and she volunteers herself for the role, forcibly joining as their club's newest member. Chiwa, on the other hand, is completely opposed to this idea, but she reluctantly accepts it knowing she has no other choice. In the club room the next day, however, the tension between Chiwa and Fuyumi is palpable, and they bicker constantly. Hime, however, pleads with Chiwa to stop fighting with Fuyumi, as she believes that Fuyumi could be their ticket to becoming pure elegant maidens, which Masuzu agrees as well, pointing out that Fuyumi's rich and charming boyfriend would make her a great mentor. This catches Fuyumi off guard, and she's forced to reluctantly keep up the lie about having a boyfriend. With this, Masuzu urges Ida to pretend to ask Fuyumi out, so she can show the girls how a maiden should properly respond. But while Fuyumi tries her best to act cool, she's secretly fantasized about this exact moment for years. But when Ida backs down after Fuyumi's fake rejection, she becomes annoyed, and warns him that if this situation ever happens again, he should at least pretend to get angry. And upon sensing the escalating awkwardness, Masuzu grabs Ida's notebook and demands that he use one of his 100% pure awesomeness pickup lines, which completely humiliates him as usual, but Ida reluctantly agrees under Masuzu's threatening gaze. And despite being a loser, Ida completely rizzes up Fuyumi, who is so entertained by his odd behavior and quirky pickup lines that she can't resist anymore and throws herself at him, even going so far as to claim that they're already a couple with plans to marry after they graduate. Naturally, the rest of the club reacts with disapproval, and Ida urges Fuyumi to relax and act more reasonably. Snapping back to her senses, Fuyumi insists she was only pretending to be swept off her feet, but her sincerity is met with skepticism. Meanwhile, Chiwa warns Fuyumi that as Ida's childhood friend, Fuyumi should ask for her permission before hugging Ida, which Fuyumi immediately shuts down by revealing that she's also Ida's childhood friend, having known him for 10 years, much longer than Chiwa, a revelation that breaks Chiwa's heart. Later that day, Ida waits for Chiwa outside the bathroom like a creep, as he wants to know why she's suddenly so upset. And at first, Chiwa brushes it off, but Ida sees through her and explains that the depth of their friendship is what matters, not who knew him first, which rapidly brightens Chiwa's mood. The next day, while on a date with Masuzu, Ida asks her for permission to accompany Chiwa to shop for swimsuits. And to his surprise, Masuzu agrees, as she acknowledges that Ida's childhood friends hold a special place in his life that she can't compete with. So the next day, Ida and Chiwa meet up, only to find out that Masuzu has unexpectedly decided to join them, leading to an argument between Chiwa and Masuzu, who bicker over Ida as usual. Meanwhile, Hime and Fuyumi just happen to be in the area together, and they observe the argument from a distance. And once they actually arrive at the store, the girls continue to fight for Ida's attention, and ultimately agree to hold a friendly competition to see whose swimsuit will entice Ida more. But while the girls get changed, Hime pulls Ida into a fitting room to seek his opinion on her swimsuit, requiring every ounce of Ida's strength to resist touching her plot. But as soon as he escapes one hopeless situation, he's dragged right back into another one, as Fuyumi drags him to watch her try on dresses for their future wedding. But when the other girls arrive and see the lunacy taking place before them, they eventually decide that the best thing to do is have Ida spend an equal amount of time with each of them, which Ida has absolutely no say in. But the plan works, and Ida finds himself spending quality time with all of his waifus one after the other. But while heading home afterwards, Ida catches Masuzu being unusually quiet, and asks her what's on her mind. In response, she admits that she feels a bit excluded, as she doesn't share a past with him like the others do. But Ida comforts her, reassuring her that they'll create plenty of new memories together from that moment forward. Suddenly, Ida spots his Aunt Seiko heading their way. She greets them warmly, but out of the blue, Seiko throws everyone off guard by asking which one of them is Ida's lover, prompting Masuzu to confidently step forward and declare herself his girlfriend. But Seiko immediately laughs and explains that she wasn't asking about his fake girlfriend, leaving everyone completely shocked. Later, back at Ida's house, the topic shifts to their upcoming beach trip and, more importantly, how they'll scrape together enough money to make it happen. And upon hearing this, Seiko perks up and suggests they enter a declaration of love contest hosted by her company, which could win them access to the company's fancy resort near the beach. But in order to practice before the real contest, Seiko decides to test the girls by having them all answer a series of questions, with the highest scorer being declared the most in love with Ida. Once the questions are completed, it's revealed that Fuyumi secured the top score, while Masuzu shockingly lands at the bottom, since her responses were so calculated that it came across like she isn't in love at all. Despite this outcome, Masuzu stays resolute, determined to prove to Seiko that she is not only Ida's girlfriend but also deeply in love with him. The next day, Ida and Masuzu are putting on their usual charade as a couple on the train, despite everyone else now growing awfully suspicious of their fake relationship. When the gang finally arrives at their destination, they're greeted by a stunning blue beach, setting the scene for a mandatory beach episode. But after a day of Ida splashing around with his harem of beautiful girls and enjoying sights filled with more plot than any mere mortal man can handle, the gang head to the house where they'll be staying. But shortly after arriving, while Ida is busy fixing a light bulb, he overhears Fuyumi having a serious conversation with Masuzu. Fuyumi warns her that if she's only pretending to date Ida, she'll never forgive her. This worries Ida, making him wonder how their friends will react if they find out the truth about their fake relationship. Determined to sell their fake relationship, Ida and Masuzu come up with a plan later that night to convince their friends that they're genuinely dating. And after discussing potential plans for a while, they decide to say goodnight with a kiss in front of everyone before they head to bed. So later on, Ida and the girls are playing cards together when Ida casually announces that he's going to bed. But before they all turn in for the night, Chiwa surprises them with a gift of matching phone straps for everyone, as she reveals that she, Fuyumi, and Hime had worked together to make them, which deeply moves Ida and Masuzu, and they decide not to go through with their plan after all. In the bedroom afterwards, Masuzu and Ida sit down for a heart-to-heart. Reflecting on the situation, Masuzu contemplates dropping out of the contest, knowing she stands little chance against the other girls. And although she ultimately decides to stick it out, she suddenly grabs Ida's journal and flips to the part where he wrote that he will become a doctor and heal Chiwa, as she reveals that once the trip ends, she plans to let him go so he can be with Chiwa. On the day of the contest, Hime faces intense stage fright, as she's even too nervous to step onto the stage. So Ida suggests she do something she loves to help calm her nerves, and without hesitation, Hime hugs Ida, while confessing her feelings for him and explaining how knowing him has given her the courage to overcome her anxiety and even make friends. But as the crowd begins to cheer, it's revealed that Ida and Hime are being filmed, and their moment is displayed on a monitor for everyone to see. And later that afternoon, Masuzu participates in the love contest as well, intending to use this moment to end her fake relationship with Ida once and for all, as she feels bad for having deceived her friends this entire time. But when Ida realizes what she's about to do, he rushes to stop her, and thankfully arrives just in time, stepping onto the stage right as she's about to spill the truth. And in that moment, Ida confesses his feelings, boldly declaring that he loves Masuzu, and that no one else could ever be her match. And this heartfelt confession seemingly brings an end to the charade, transforming their relationship from fake to real. The next morning, Ida wakes up to find Masuzu sitting on top of him, acting unusually affectionate and overly clingy. But before he can process what's happening, Seiko invites him out for a walk, where they discuss his complicated harem situation. And Seiko bluntly advises Ida to either make everyone accept his relationship with Masuzu, or make them hate him, in order to spare the girls any more heartache. Taking this to heart, Ida decides to give it a shot by first talking to Hime, but that plan quickly falls flat as Hime loves him so much that she misinterprets his every word in the best possible light, and even ends up hugging him as she fantasizes about their future together. Not ready to give up, Ida moves on to Fuyumi, who is already furious at him for choosing Masuzu over her. Once in her room, Ida dramatically asks to see their so-called marriage certificate and plans to tear it to pieces. But when he catches a glimpse of Fuyumi's heartbroken expression, he hesitates and can't go through with it. To make things worse, he accidentally gets a paper cut, and as blood drips onto the paper, Fuyumi misinterprets it as him stamping the certificate, believing he's agreed to the marriage. And last but not least, Ida finds Chiwa standing alone on the balcony, gazing out at the sea. He asks if she's upset about him being with Masuzu, and she quietly lets a few tears fall. But while trying to comfort her, Ida is caught off guard when Chiwa suddenly turns around and confesses her love for him. And as if things couldn't get more complicated, Masuzu appears out of nowhere, asking if she can join in on the moment, while Ida feels completely frustrated and torn between his girlfriend and his childhood best friend, unsure which girl his heart is truly leading him towards. Thanks for watching today's anime recap. Make sure to check out my other videos or the Riz Demons will find you.
Take it,